Good evening, and today I'd like to talk to you about a very strange answer the historian and broadcaster David Olusoga gave when he was asked a question at a recent talk he gave on the history of black people in Bristol. Now, I think this is being promoted as the hidden history of black people in the city of Bristol, my hometown. And it's on YouTube. I think he and John who was one of the other presenters, I've also given a talk about it to one of the hosts of Novara Media. Now, Bristol was one of the three very biggest cities involved in the British slave trade. There was London, which made a lot of money early and then got out, Bristol and Liverpool. And then of course there were a lot of other cities. So yes, just from the era of the slave trade, there's a considerable, there is a history of black people in Bristol. And this goes back as far as the 16th century, and there is a pamphlet published by the Bristol branch of the Historical Association about the black community of Bristol in the 16th century. Now, Olusoga, apparently, this comes from Simon Webb's History Debunked channel. Olusoga was apparently asked by someone if there was any evidence or a black presence in the site or region of Bristol before the 16th century. And Olusoga didn't give an answer. He's supposed to have said something like that black people have been in Britain, and we've known about them since the 16th century. And this history has been obscured or neglected, and it's been recovered in the past couple of decades, which is true. But it's fragmentary. And he said he talked about black people in Britain going back as far as the 16th century, but then he says that this history is fragmentary. Now, the Bristol region is an ancient landscape. Bristol itself seems to have been founded in the 11th century as a bridgehead burh. That means that it spanned both banks of the Avon, and it was intended to protect the River Avon from Viking attack, because the Vikings used to sail up rivers and then get out and raid, right? So that's that's one of the reasons. Sometime in the 19th century, I think there was something about they found a load of swords, or pulled a load of swords from, I think, the Iron Age or the Bronze Age out of the river. There were settlements in Bristol, in the Bristol area, before the city itself was founded. One of these was Bedminster, which was founded as a minster, which is a type of Anglo-Saxon monastery. And on the other side of the city, in Gloucestershire, there was Westbury on Trym, which goes back to the days of Offa Mercia, he of the Dyke. There's also a couple of Celtic hillforts in the Bristol area. There's one on Dundry, just south of the city, in Somerset, and there's another in the near to the Blaise Castle estate. There have also been a number of Roman villas excavated here. One of them seems to be on Innscourt Green, again, south of Bristol. I think there was another one found off Union Street, which surprised everyone, because Union Street is near the very centre of Bristol. And for a long time it was thought that Bristol was actually too marshy for the Romans to have colonised, because you have things like St Philip's Marsh, again, down on, which is a part of Bristol, and also Frogmore Street. If you go back to, I think, the 15th or the 14th century, it's Frogmarsh Street. So that tells you about the marshy land in Bristol. Now, going even further back, there's Stanton Drew Stone Circle, which again is in Somerset, south of Bristol. What survives of it is actually quite small. It's a stone circle, a bit like Stonehenge, but I think without the trilithons, without the cross pieces on the stone. It's quite small now, but archaeologists have suggested that at one time it was huge. Really massive and impressive. That would have been in the megalithic age. It's probably Neolithic. There are also Bronze Age tumuli around Bristol, or in the Bristol region. One is up on Dundry, but that was robbed out in the 19th century. And further down into Somerset, there are pretty 9 barrows, which are 9 roughly saucer-shaped burial mounds for Bronze Age chieftains lined up in a row on a hilltop. So it's quite an ancient, it's an ancient landscape. However, while there certainly are records of black people in Bristol in the 16th century, there is no evidence of black people before then. But Olusoga doesn't say that. He just says it's fragmentary, which gives the impression that black people are living in the Bristol area, but we haven't found them yet. Now, this is a very problematic statement to make, because I mean, at the moment, it looks very, very much that there were no black people in the Bristol area before before the 16th century or much before the 16th century. Now, it could be that as excavation and documentary investigation continues, people do discover that there were blacks in Bristol. These things happen all the time. But I think, to be honest, you have to say either not at the moment, either there is no evidence for them at the moment, or no. We haven't found any. We don't think they were in the Bristol area, but with the proviso, obviously, that this could change. Now, I think one of the reasons why Olusoga did not make that reply is because of ideological constraints by the people found by some of the people who may well be involved at this talk with the talk. Now, when the Black Lives Matter protests broke out, Black Lives Matter put a huge poster on a hoarding out, just beyond St Paul's, which is a very racially mixed area of Bristol. Down by, if you go past it, if you turn right coming up the road from the south of Bristol and turn right, you're on the motorway. Yep, that's where they had it. And it said, and it was there to present their argument for the protests, and one of these was, it ended with, we are not trying to start a race war, we are trying to end one. But it begins with, we have always been here. Now, that's a very problematic statement, because the evidence is that black people haven't. Not in any large numbers, and the mass of black people actually really appear in the years following Windrush. There is a black presence in Bristol before then, and you can see it going back to the 18th century and again in the 16th century. There's probably also some in the 17th, but before then, no. But there is a tenet, one of the tenets of Afrocentrist doctrine is that black people are the original inhabitants of just about every country in the world, including Britain. And I think this is where the attitude, the statement that we have always come here, black people have always been in Britain, comes from, ultimately. And I think Olusoga, could not admit that there were either no black people in Bristol, or there is no evidence for them before the 16th century. I think he could not have made that statement because it would have contradicted the view coming out from the Black Lives Matter supporters, Black Lives Matter supporters who were no doubt, who I think may well have been involved in this event. Now, Olusoga is a great broadcaster. His programme, A House Through Time, where he looked at the history of people's houses and how this changed, as time progressed from the 19th century to the 20th, and looking at changes of occupation, obviously. And that was fascinating. And he has personally suffered racism. I mean, there was something he wrote in the Radio Times a few years ago about having bricks thrown through his house windows or something when he was a child, which is obviously terrible. But I think the problem here is that his attitude, his personal experience of racism is colouring his attitude towards history. And there is a problem with black history in that, well, some of it is very, very good. I mean, they're uncovering some really fascinating people all the time. Some of it is mythology. Like the Nigerian woman author who said in her book, was it brilliant black British history that Stonehenge was built by blacks? Stonehenge was not built by blacks. I mean, this is rubbish. It's a fantasy. And I think we have to be very, very careful indeed about some of the claims in black British history, even when it comes from someone as highly intelligent and skilled as David Olusoga. Thank you for listening.